Culture to me means to be human, it means to be artistic, it means to explore the very breadth of who you are as an individual, but also the way society comes together, when it's linked together through art, when it's linked together through love, when it's linked together through community. Culture is to be human.
Well, for me, culture means two things. It's a way of life. It's a culture of the people, but culture in this sense means soul food. It's intellectual nutrition, it's books and arts and debate and painting and architecture and all those things that enrich lives. And you know, it's the sort of thing that if a dictator, for example, wants to control the people, they get rid of the culture. It's thought, and as I say, it's soul food.
I think for me, culture is telling stories. I think culture is like the evidence of all of us trying to figure out who we are and where we've been and where we're going. I think it's like the best kind of footprint of humanity is far more enduring and important than skyscrapers and buildings and boundaries and walls. I think the stories that we leave are our best legacy.
Culture to me is not just art, it's just a combination of life, society. It's just basically the zeitgeist, the reflection of human expression.
Culture to me is a really important thing that shows the similarities and differences between groups of people. It showcases the things that make us unique, but also the things that will bring us together and create a sense of community around us.
Culture means a lot. Culture is almost like a living, breathing organism, almost like the sixth force of nature in this world. It's ever evolving. It is relevant, it is the past, it's the future. And art responds to culture by making sure that our voices are heard or the struggle about being heard.
I think events like the EFG London Jazz Festival really do help to inspire female audiences from stage and the performers and singers and musicians that we see, but also from behind the scenes and how things all come together, the programming of events, the filming, the putting together all of the structure that makes the festival happen.
It changes perception, people get used to more, and jazz is in itself, it's quite, I would say, historically more male-dominated music genre, I would say. So London Jazz Festival pushing those boundaries for female artists, I think is very important and changes quite a lot. Having a director of the festival that is female, I think would be super inspiring to the young talent who would want to do something in the culture industries as well, and the people that work here. So it's just like the institution becomes an exemplary for people who are looking at this specific area of work, and that's why I think it's very important.
Festivals have a really important role to play when it comes to enabling artists in general to develop. I always remember the very first time I was on the bill of the EFG London Jazz Festival, I got so excited because it felt to me like a recognition of who I was as an individual. And that's really important for artists, and I think that the EFG London Jazz Festival does that brilliantly. They bring together both established artists but also artists who are less well known. It's a platform. For some it is a beginning, for others it's a way of developing mid-career, but it's really important. That recognition can make all the difference to an artist's life, and it's so important.
I think the festivals are giving these combined opportunities to artists, but when it comes to why is it important for younger artists or artists, from gender minorities or women artists, I think the festival is the platform where they can freely be themselves and they can act as role models for the coming generations of musicians like themselves. I think that's an important part of being a member of a bigger festival family.
Festivals like the EFG London Jazz Festival play a huge role in promoting women in jazz and women in music, full stop. If you look at some festivals though, I have to say that they do stuff up their kind of gender balance in the lineup, and I think it's about visibility. It's about normalising the fact that there are women who are jazz musicians, there are women who play instruments. We want to get to the point where it doesn't matter whether you see them as a woman or a man, I mean where gender is kind of neutral, they are just musicians. But to get to that point we need festivals like this.
I think festivals like the London Jazz Festival are really important. I think they're kind of like the shop front. They're for a lot of people who might not engage in jazz and improvised music throughout the rest of the year. Big festivals can kind of draw new audiences in. So for some people, what they think of as jazz and improvised music, they'll see through a festival, especially one like London's, which is citywide. But also I think when you're a festival, you have a responsibility to make sure that you balance the kind of big established artists with some risk taking in your programming. And so part of that is making sure that you have really balanced, reflective, representative programming. So festivals are a really important part of the ecosystem and for affecting change, you know.
There are so many women who have shaped jazz. You look at somebody like Alice Coltrane, you look at somebody like Dorothy Ashby, Nina Simone, I mean all these greats. Many of the greats from back in the day, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, you know, these women burned really brightly and they really, you know, blaze trails and set precedents. In the UK you have people like Barbara Thompson, the great saxophonist who was given an MBE in the 90s. You have people like Deirdre Cartwright and Alison Rayner from Blow the Fuse, who were in a band called the Guest Stars in the 80s, a Latin band that were doing really cool improvising and sort of just taking no prisoners in terms of what they were doing. And they were sort of largely ignored, but they set up Blow the Fuse as a kind of safe space, as it were, you know, for women in jazz.
For me, as a singer, women that shape jazz have always been the vocal pieces of jazz and all the issues faced by women in society. People like Nina Simone, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, who really use their voices not only to create beautiful music, but to showcase the problems for black women specifically in the jazz industry.
One of the most important musicians for me that changed jazz and thus shaped culture while they do so is Nina Simone. I think her voice, the way she portrayed social elements in her music, the way she was an activist as a woman and in terms of politics as well, I think has been quite important and powerful.
I think the biggest group of women that I came across that really kind of blew my mind in terms of the work they were doing were when I started working internationally and got to meet people involved as festival directors or agents or managers, people like Jill Roger at Glasgow Jazz Festival or Anna-Maja Sarala in Finland. These were people who'd been in the industry for 20 or 30 years and had really been huge parts of building the international scene as we see now. For me that was really inspiring because it felt less like I was in a minority and more like I'd kind of walked into a really large network of women.
Women in jazz, I think women had played an incredibly important role in developing jazz. Billie Holiday, Nina Simone, who had put a lot from their souls, risking their own well-being or risking who they are as people, but then making sure that they say the right things and they sing songs like Strange Fruit, you know, making all these unexpected statements around one beautiful song, but then it just has a lot of echoes in other areas of injustice, equality, race. I think these are really important icons which then pave the way to other musicians. When we look at the younger generation, especially in the UK, I think we are very lucky to be in a climate where we see lots of brilliant female musicians, again, being fantastic role models for generations to come, like Nubia Garcia, Cassie Kinoshi, Laura Jerd, Emma Jean Thackeray, not just as musicians, but also not just as performers, but also composers, band leaders, producers. I think we are going through a fantastic change, and I'm personally very happy to witness it.
The women that have shaped jazz vary. They vary from people like Shirley Scott, through to people like Anita O'Day, through to contemporaries like Nabaya Garcia. I think the hallmark for all these women is that they are willing to take risks with their musicality. They are willing to engage with society that often doesn't recognize them as artists. And so they have taken a step so others can do the same. And I think there's something about that is really deeply resonant and is really important. Those kind of stories are really important to be told, to be heard, to be seen, to be acknowledged, because the struggles that some women have gone through have paved the way for others that exist today.
I think there are loads of different things in this industry that we're doing to support women. A lot of people like Women in Jazz and Women in Jazz Media, inspiring young women to get into the industry and showing them that there is a way to, make this a career and make it a life choice.
I think every time I see either a funding initiative or a programming initiative that aims to kind of give women space and highlight their work, I think is great. I think we need both visibility and normalisation to make this change kind of effective and long-lasting. And I think that kind of gentle behind-the-scenes work, coupled with the kind of the bigger initiatives like Women Make Music, for example, I think they go hand in hand. Eventually, we want to get to a point where we don't have to think about it anymore, that it's second nature. But as far as I'm concerned, any initiative is a good one.
Key Change, which was initiated by PRS Foundation, or any thought form that are supported by funding mechanisms. They are tools. I think they are the things that make sure the organizations keep this thinking in mind.
Projects that support women in the industry, there are many. Women Make Music, the PRS Foundation, there are organisations like Women in Jazz Media, which is a collective that is promoting women behind the scenes in jazz. So it's not just female musicians, it's the photographers and the writers and the DJs that are kind of getting their props as well.
What does the current fight in equal representation look like? It still looks like a fight. That's what I can say. It's not definitely over, and it's probably just, we might feel that we have come a long way, and we have, but I think it's just the beginning. It still is, whether you're applying for a job, whether you're trying to get a promotion, whether you're want to find a place for yourself in a festival or venue program, whether you're trying to get the same amount of money that that male counterparts get, we're just so far away from it. There's a huge, I would say, still a gap, and a huge gap for all of these things. And every day, I think, as I said, the fight continues. So every day we should be just putting something on top of what we have already done to get to that ideal state.
I think a current fight for equal representation is a hard one, and it's also a loud one. I think people are really just crying out to be seen and to be showcased, and that's really important for showing people what the future of the industry will look like.
So I think the more we talk to each other and the more we kind of accept what we can do and kind of pool our collective efforts together, I think that's the next step, just to make sure that from the start to the end of someone's life and music, be that as an audience member or an artist, they always feel like they are reflected back in the community they're part of.
The current fight for equal representation is tough. It's tough. It's not an easy road at all. Just when you think you're getting there, then it starts to slip again. Because the challenges are numerous. People don't often believe that women can be instrumentalists, even in this day and age. People often don't believe that women can lead their own bands, or et cetera, et cetera. There are many glass ceilings that women are having to deal with. However, let me tell you, women got it going on. We know what we're going to do, we know how to do it, and we're going to keep fighting for it.
I think in terms of not just women or gender minorities, I think everyone who wants to work in the culture and arts industry in general, it's an interesting one because it's so different than any other technical job. It's the creative industries. I think it has similarities, not necessarily being the artist, but then anyone working in the creative industry is actually putting a lot from themselves into their work. But what is expected from the people working in creative industries, because it doesn't stop. You go to your work, you then go and follow up what's happening in the nightlife, in the scene. You need to see concerts. You are then constantly being viewed as you are that person, you are your job. How can you make sure that there's a good balance in being who you are and what you do? And it's our job to encourage that happening.
So what more should we be doing? I think there's a real responsibility on male musicians in jazz to open the doors, to realise that, for example, a jam session can be quite an intimidating space for a woman musician to walk into, to leave space for solos, to make female musicians feel welcome at the gig so they don't just come and want to go home again. I think that the onus is on festival programmers to make sure there's gender parity on the bill. I think it's something that needs to be talked about a lot more, and organisations like the EFG London Jazz Festival are really prompting lots of discussion and doing precisely that. But the future's looking really bright.
What we should be doing to fix these issues, or to try and fix these issues, is showcasing the talent of black people, people of colour, non-binary people, people in the LGBTQ community and women, and really just showcasing their talents in every aspect, not just in front of a screen or behind a microphone, but behind an instrument, behind the scenes, behind the workings and creation of events and everything like that. So,
what should we expect for women in culture in the future? I think we should expect nothing less than absolutely everything. I think until art reflects the world that it's part of, it's not reflective at all. So if we look at the world that we operate in and we don't see it reflected back in the work that we're doing, then we have to keep going. And until the world is completely equal, then we can't stop the fight. So we should expect the entire world.
What more can be done? Well, you can support women. Support people who want to be creative, support women who want to explore the various aspects of their own creativity. You can provide facilities that allow mothers to grow, to be able to be the artists that they are, as well as be able to bring up their children. What we should expect for the future of women working in culture is power. I think that as long as society allows women to do and be who they can be, allows them to sing their song, we will be better for it in society. And that's a really important message. I want my nieces to be able to grow up not only seeing people do the kind of work that I and others do, but also say, I want to be that, about how important representation is, not only as women, but also as women of colour, if you're a woman of colour, or wherever you come on the spectrum. It's really important that now the future that we should be looking for and at includes and embraces women in all their diversity.
So I hope that the future comes quick and that the future is female.